what makes someone remarkable? Do you mind being described as the white people whisperer? What is the optimal age to get married?
That year was the first year that we ever heard a teacher talk about race.
Is the college application process fair?
You start to find the non-obvious way kind of works.
Is there like a cartoonist community? So many times when we go live with these things, it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom.
Boom.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Non-Obvious Insights Show. I'm your host, Rohit Bhargava, and I am so excited to have this particular episode as part of our Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit with an absolutely amazing guest. You're going to love her. Indrani Goradia is the founder of Indrani's Light, which is a foundation that does amazing work to end gender-based violence across the world. She has done so many other things. She's a TED Talk speaker and just a fascinating person. And so I just can't wait for this conversation. So Indrani, how are you? Welcome.
Good morning. Is it still morning? No, it's afternoon here in Houston, Texas. Good afternoon. The sun is shining. I am so happy and lucky to be here with you. So I am just fine.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. And we have, I think, so many conversations leading up to this. It sort of feels like we're old friends, even though we haven't really met before a couple weeks ago.
We must have known each other in a different life because the way we three connected was not normal.
Yeah. And the third is obviously my wife and producer, Chhavi, who's been kind of behind the scenes doing a lot of this. And it's great. I mean, it's just wonderful conversations. And when we started this process of just going out and finding so many people doing amazing things, the process of learning about everyone's work has been one of the absolute joys of doing this summit, and in particular of doing this show. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to talk to you, because for people who don't know, I mean, you have a very interesting story to get to your point where you are now. And I thought maybe we could start back at the beginning, and just with your family and how you got into this cause of gender-based violence, because I think it's a very powerful story, and it's important for people to hear it, I think, in your words. So maybe you could just share that as a starting point.
Thank you. And for me, starting at the beginning, I'm going to have to start in the middle and loop back and then come forward. So let's start when I was 31 years old and I had just given birth to my first child, Vishal. And Vishal was 3 weeks old. I gave birth on December 24th. So now it's the middle of January. And I had a C-section and the doctor was a butcher and he cut me this way and not that way. So there was tremendous pain, and I woke up in the middle of the night to nurse, and my baby would not stop crying. And I had a thought, hit the baby, and the baby will stop crying. For any of you listening, I hope you realize that that is craziness. Luckily for me, in the moment, I realized, but that doesn't make any sense. You're going to hit the baby and then make the baby be in more pain and the baby will stop crying. And the better angels won in that moment. I did not hit, I never hit my children.
Well, sorry, I just want to kind of go backwards a little bit, because there's a reason why your mind went there, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the reason yet. And that's why we start in the 30s and not way back.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, by the way, I did not marry a man who ever was abused or believed in abuse. So I was lucky. I chose well. If I had married an abuser, he would have said, hit the kid. And there would have been a whole different, we would not have been speaking.
Yeah.
During the course of the next 3 years, as my son is growing, I'm realizing through therapy that all the things that happened to me that I thought they were normal, I was a bad kid, I must have done something horribly wrong, that was abuse. And that my mind had been primed to think of abusive behaviors as options. And like I said before, my children are now in their 30s, and I've never hit. It took me a little while longer to understand that yelling and screaming were also forms of abuse. So I would say, if it took me, if I learned to stop hitting immediately, it took another 3-4 years. And as my kids were growing, and as I was seeing that I was parenting so differently, and by the way, how did I know how to parent? I started to parent the way I wished I had been parented. So, my kids are growing and the milk is spilled, and I would have been slapped off the chair for spilling milk. I remember looking at the milk and laughing out loud and saying, oh my gosh, we spilled that milk. Let's clean it up. And we made a big dance out of cleaning up the milk. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do all the time. I'm going to make it something funny, something not at all significant. Now, if it was the only milk I had for the day and there was no other milk for the child, I can see where that would be a tragedy. But in my case, I had milk in the refrigerator. It was never going to be a tragedy. Yeah, and I started looking at things in that way. Is this a tragedy? Should I treat this thing as if my child had just committed some horrible offense? No. Children are supposed to make mistakes, and they're supposed to make a lot of mistakes, and they learn how to recover from mistakes by the way parents react.
And how do you I mean, it's so important to have that perspective. I mean, especially as a parent, and we all who have kids, I mean, I think we spend, whether consciously or unconsciously, a lot of time thinking about, like, what type of parent am I going to be? Especially when my kid screws up. I mean, that's a parenting opportunity, right? You either help them solve their problem, or you just yell at them and maybe physically intimidate them in some way, right? I wonder, as you thought about this journey of kind of becoming a mom and becoming the sort of mother you wanted to be, how do you go from doing that to now making it part of your sort of profession to talk about this topic, to become an advocate?
I hope you can see this big grin on my face, because the work that I do now with my foundation, it just fills my entire body, every cell, every brain, every thought, every ounce of blood that's being pumped in. The joy is so great. And how did I decide to do a foundation? I didn't even know about foundations. I wasn't originally thinking foundations. My first thought when I wanted to do something to help, my thought was, well, I wished I had had someone to teach me how to not be abusive. So I want to help teach parents how to not be abusive. Well, where was I going to help find parents? I didn't have a PhD. I wasn't about to go back to school. I That's not something I wanted to do.
And you
So how
you
was I
weren't going
going
to
to
be
find the parents?
and you
Pardon?
weren't going to be one of those moms who has a kid and gets to 5 years old and says, "Oh, now I'm an expert mom. I can write a book about it." Because there's a lot of those people out there as well.
I know. And I just want to shoot the book and shoot them. I mean, I know I'm anti-violence, but it's when you write a book.
Maybe a paint gun shoot, like maybe, that might be like less violent, maybe more embarrassing.
You know, the paint guns?
Yeah. Or maybe like
it hurts a little bit, but it
like,
doesn't kill you.
yeah, like a creamed broccoli gun. I think that would be something,
Or
like
a
that
water
would be
gun.
just disgusting on so many levels. That would be a real insult to shoot someone with a creamed broccoli gun, I think.
That's true. And we would have to make the broccoli ourselves.
Oh yeah, that'd be even worse.
It would be like a system. We would be creating. Oh my gosh, we're so off course. Okay, let me get back.
Way off course. Yes, sorry about that.
No, don't apologize. It was not wrong.
I thought a little lightness with the violence would be good. Maybe I was wrong.
Always. If I'm speaking to a client and they've just told me the most horrific story, if I can make them laugh, then we can move forward.
It's healing power, right?
Laughter is amazing. Laughter is amazing. And one of the first things I say is, you just told me a very intense story. Yes. How brave are you? What do you mean? I didn't leave. I was still, and I said, no, but you survived. You survived to tell me, and you're not crying and you're not falling apart. That is bravery. And most people don't see that as bravery. And I see that as ultimate bravery. Anyway, let me go right back.
And you give that validation, right? I mean, that's really powerful, because for some of them, I imagine that's just not something they've had. People validating their experience, or at least saying like, look, you made it through this. Like you have something to be proud of.
And most people say, oh, why did you stay? Oh my gosh, you stayed that long? Oh, if it were me, I would never accept that. When most of us don't know what the heck we're going to accept or not accept. We have to be in the moment. Yeah.
Well, especially as a child, I mean, a lot of times I think we put this perspective of, I mean, we're an adult, we know what we've lived a certain amount of our lives, and when we put ourselves back into that time frame, like it's almost impossible to imagine, like, what would I have done when I was 17 versus what would I do now when I'm in my 40s? Like, that's different.
And even thinking at 7 and at 14 and at 17, even though we're so much older at 17 than at 7, we still have no power. We cannot provide our own shelter. We cannot provide our own food and still go to school. We cannot provide our own safety. We depend on we depend on the caregivers to provide so many things. And if they are also abusing us, we don't feel like we have any choices. The only choice we feel like we have is, I'll be a better person. Because if we were good, they wouldn't be doing what they were doing.
One of the things that I think is interesting in that is, I mean, this fight is to some degree, I think, about creating some sort of systemic change. And absolutely. I wonder, when you think about that systemic change, there's really two parties in this group, right? There's the kids and there's the parents. And when you talk about the kids, it's, teach them empowerment, stand up for themselves, be confident, versus the message to the parents is, is this the type of parent you want to be, I imagine, and trying to maybe change their perception of saying, look, these things that you think are maybe discipline, or maybe you just describe yourself as being like a little harsh, but like you don't actually see it as abuse. Do you think the mission of the foundation in your work, have you found it's like you spend 60% of your time on the parents and 40% on the kids? Is it 90% on the parents? I'm just curious, like, where do you focus your effort?
So now, in 2021, we pivoted last year, but before that, we had to pivot completely away from victims, and we started to teach advocates, which advocates are staff or administrators in sexual and domestic violence organizations. And the reason we did that was because when we were trying to reach the parents and therefore the kids, if you are a victim, your brain, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If I don't know where my food is coming from, and if I don't know where I'm going to be living in 30 days, because most shelters give people 30 days, there is no way they can listen to me about empowerment. Lady, what are you, stupid? Empowerment? I have no food. I have no place to live. I have to go back to the abuser. You want me to tell the abuser no? You're asking for me to be in more trouble. So we realized that that original population of people, they needed more stability to be able to uptake these bigger executive level functioning concepts. You know, just setting a boundary is tremendous executive level functioning. And if we were never taught how to set a boundary, if we were never allowed to say no, if we were taught to do everything that is asked of us, when I come to talk to you about boundaries, you're looking at me as if I have two heads. What do you mean a boundary? If I say no to the people who are yelling at me or hitting me, if I say, oh, you're not allowed to do that, I'm in big trouble, lady. So we had to figure out how to teach these concepts now to people who were not victims, but who were staff. And in turn, the staff can take what they think the clients need. And that's what we've been doing. And it's going really well.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of the stories of how well it's going. I mean, I want to hear about some of the examples of cases where you've looked at this either with your staff or with yourself. And I mean, I see the joy that you have with this, and I think that part of it probably comes from some success that you've seen where you're like, yeah, this really works. Like, this has made a big difference. So take us inside that. Like, what does a success story look like? Like, what does that feel like?
I just got an email last week, and it sounded something like this. Indrani, because of your classes on how to say no and setting a boundary, I used my voice at work today, and I said what was not working and how we should be doing things differently. And everybody told me to not speak, but I know it was the right thing. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not a victim. I read that over and over and over. And then I called her and I said, tell me more. And she said, well, I always knew that I should stand up for myself and stand up for my clients because she's an advocate, but I didn't know how. And your classes not only told me that, yes, my idea or my belief that I should stand up was the right belief, but you showed me how, what my values were. You told me how to say no in a positive way. And you told me when to stand and when to sit. And so I stood and I waited and there was no response. And I didn't say, is that okay with you? Right? Because now all of the power goes away. And I left. And I said to her, do you still have a job? And she said, yeah, I still have a job.
That's the great news behind that too. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Every Woman Treaty. I know you're very involved in that. Can you describe that for people who aren't familiar with it and just tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, the Every Woman Treaty, and everybody, please go to everywoman.org. If you can believe, there is no global treaty that addresses violence against women, even in this day and age. So some people who are looking at this might say, well, what about CEDAW? Well, CEDAW is a treaty out of the United Nations, and it's nowhere in the CEDAW document is violence mentioned. CEDAW is about discrimination against women. And for a woman to prove violence under the CEDAW document, she has to prove that it was first discrimination. So at Every Woman, we combed the globe, and we combed all the treaties, the Maputo Treaty and the Istanbul Treaty. And I know people are going to be saying, what is that? Well, the Istanbul Treaty is for mainly European women and what violence is happening there. And the Maputo Treaty is mainly for the African bloc and what's happening there. And we don't have a treaty for the entire world and all the women. And so we have done our work, and we have taken the best of everything that's out there. And now we are in process of getting this treaty ratified. I think as I speak, we have about 7 countries already ready to do something. And we even have a country ready to take it forward. I'm afraid to say which country that is because I haven't been given the okay yet. But we have a significant country whose president said, I'm holding up my hand. I want to take this forward. And so, some people say to me, oh, Indrani, that's just stupid. That's not going to work. And I say, when was the last time you smoked on an airplane? Oh, that's not allowed. Exactly. Tobacco treaty.
Yeah.
When was the last time you could smoke in a restaurant? That's not allowed either. Tobacco treaty. Mm-hmm. Have you been seeing ads on TV about anti-smoking? Yes. Tobacco treaty. So we are taking almost all the things that worked well from the tobacco treaty and the landmines treaty, because by the way, with the landmines treaty, countries were given square meters of earth that they had to be clearing every year. And so that was a measurement, right? If you said you were going to clear 500 square meters and you only cleared 100 square meters, the whole world was going to know that.
Well, and you, one of the things you're kind of talking about here is the relationship, which I love, is the relationship between policy, legislation, and something that is sort of a movement and real action and measurable goals and things like that. And I think that one of the things we've been trying to do in this diversity summit in particular is make the connection between these things that may be movements that change perception and also make us feel good, but connecting that to real action. And I wonder in the work that you've done and in all of the work you're doing to empower women, to end gender-based violence, let's try and make the connection in particular to some of the amazing efforts that are happening in the DEI space and the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and our sort of shared goal towards this more inclusive society. Because one of the effects of the pandemic right now in particular is women have been disproportionately affected in terms of having to leave work, go back, take care of kids, go back into the home. You have a huge implication of people who are in abusive homes or in abusive relationships who are now stuck at home. Like they don't even have the escape of going to school or work or any of these things. How much of the work that you've been doing, in particular over the past year, has had to pivot in some way because of the way the world has changed?
We've had to pivot 100%. We used to do all of our work in person. We would travel to different states. I used to travel to India and Trinidad and Tobago, and I would teach on the ground. And now everything's online. But Rohit, I have to tell you, because we pivoted and because we were all online, the Department of Justice found us. Can I say that again? The Department, no, not Department of Justice, Department of Defense. So we are now doing classes for the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy. How does that happen?
Amazing.
Right? Yeah. I am this little short brown woman in Texas who had a dream.
Highly charismatic little short brown woman, I have to add, which is probably part of the reason why it's working.
When I said to my family, oh, I'm going to do this, Everybody lined up to tell me I couldn't do it. Everybody. And for the Army and the Navy to find us in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, because we pivoted online, it just blows my mind. It just blows my mind. 2 weeks ago, I was teaching, and the students were sitting in South Korea and Japan. What? It was the best, one of the best Christmas presents ever. And so here's a little aside to everybody. If you have a dream and people are lining up to tell you not to do it, make a list of those naysayers, because they're the same people that you're going to be saying nanny, nanny, boo, boo when you get, when it's successful. But going back to how do we take action? During COVID, violence increased almost 40% in every single country. And the statistics were already pretty sad. It's 1 in 3 women who will experience violence across her lifetime. So you add 40% of that, on top of that, and you have more than half. I think, so when someone says to me, how easy is violence to end? It's the easiest thing. It's easier to end than for me to get the COVID vaccine. Because for me to get a COVID vaccine, scientists had to be involved, research had to be involved, protocols had to be involved. We had to have guinea pigs for them to get the vaccine first before I could get a vaccine. Ending violence in your home is a decision. And what do I mean? If I say that I love my children and that I want and that I love them the most in the world, and I love my spouse and I want to stay married to that person, if I say that and I believe it, then what part of that includes, and I'm going to beat the hell out of them every single day? Like, how does that work? So we have to look at, what do we mean by love? Do we mean I can love you only if you do exactly what I tell you to do, and if you don't, then I'm going to beat you? Or does it mean I love you and I will work with you? So we have to look at, what do we mean by when we say, yes, I love these people, and yes, I want the best for them. And can we sit down as a family, and can we, for the person who wants to make the change, that person has to be the bravest. And I think it's usually the mom. And go home and say, hey, listen, I listened to this crazy lady, and she said that we should have a family meeting, and we should all apologize to each other for the yelling and screaming we've been doing. And moving forward, we should make promises to each other to not do that. And we need everyone's help. So if you see me losing my temper, because moms, we have tells, right? We go, what? And then if you see that happening, let's come up with a safe word. And when I hear the safe word, I will just immediately put myself in timeout. Parents were always talking about putting kids in timeout. We need to put ourselves in timeout.
Wow, parents we can put ourselves in timeout. That's a big big
when
idea.
You want to scream,
I mean, you're talking about something that is very common for people who do mindfulness training and things like that, right? They say, take a breath, like separate yourself from the situation. And,
right.
and you've been, when you talked about this and when you share some of these stories in the way that you shared, I mean, I can imagine those South Koreans sitting in that audience, listening to you and just being really inspired. And your story has taken you to, here's a random image of a shovel, which we have to ask you about this one because it relates to your talk, but I want the story
you
for
will
this
have
one.
to ask, yes.
Yes. But you've met some pretty famous people yourself. I mean, you've run in some pretty well-known circles in the past. This is you just hanging out with Obama. I think you probably, maybe shot some hoops at some point afterwards.
This is the new guy.
Our new president as well. So you've been in many of these places, and I think that to some degree, we look to people like that who have that sort of charisma to give us permission to do the sorts of things like sit down at the table and say, look, we're going to change our situation. We're going to take a pause. We're going to have a timeout. One of the beautiful things I think about a summit like this one that we're doing is we're bringing together a lot of the audience, I think, are those people. You know, they're the ones who have the opportunity to be that person, either in their family or in their community or in their organizations. And they're watching something like this for the inspiration to do that. And I wonder if as you talk about that, and then we're going to get to the shovel, if when you think about in business lingo, we call it train the trainer, right? But this idea of like maybe inspire the inspirers would be a better way of describing it. How do you do that? Because you have leaders within your organization, and you can't be everywhere at once. And you won't always have the chance to be the person. And so you have to build an army of those people. And I wonder if you could share some lessons on how you've done that.
I think the first thing is that we have to respect ourselves. If I respect myself, and if I give myself the permission to believe every single word that will fall out of my mouth, then my words have to be honorable. I cannot give myself permission to say, my God, I just hate you today, because that's a powerful sentence. And I cannot give myself permission to say, I was in a bad mood, I didn't mean it. Because if I could not mean half the things I said, how do you know that I mean the other things that I'm saying? So it's introspection. It is it's the timeout. It's the breath. It is the moment when I decide that I am not going to blame anybody else for the thing that I just did or the words that I just said. And if we don't start with ourselves first, then we don't really have any hope. Because even if nobody else in the house decides to stop yelling and screaming, if we start modeling that I will no longer yell and scream, and I am depending on you guys to give me the safe word so I know when to take myself out of the heat, we may never know how much of it they're getting. And just because they're not modeling it back as quickly as we want it modeled back, we cannot give ourselves permission to stop. I remember something really sweet. My daughter had just gone off to college, and she called to tell me something. And she said, well, so Mom, my friend said this, and her boyfriend was doing this, and I told her she should do this. And I said, honey, where did you learn that? And she said, Mom, from you. And I said, well, you never had a boyfriend to treat you like that. She said, no, but I heard you talk to other people.
They're listening,
right?
Yeah,
they're listening, right?
Yeah, and it's sticking in their heads. And every once in a while, we do get that chance where we see something that our children do, and whether they tell us directly, which is, I'm looking forward to the day when they do that and tell me directly something like that. But in the meantime, I can watch their behavior, right? I can
absolutely
see how they act, and that's what we. That's what we notice. That's what we see. So, amazing, powerful lessons. I love the way that you've talked about these things and the way you tell your story. We have to close by talking about the shovel and some of the things that you've shared in that. I think that might be from your talk. Maybe your TED
this
talk.
Is from the TED Talks.
Yeah. Okay. So when they say there's a formula, right, for the TED Talks, you got to have something provocative. Like, didn't Bill Gates release a bunch of mosquitoes during his TED Talk?
But none of them were carrying Zika.
Yeah. Did he test every single one? Is that how he did it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he spends his billions on, testing individual mosquitoes.
For Zika, yeah. So the shovel. I was in Trinidad, and I had spoken to a group of young people, 14 to 18, and I had asked how many of, and this was just recent, this was about 7 years ago, how many of you were being abused and what were you being abused with? And a few people said they were being hit with shovels. So when I was invited to do the TED Talk, I decided that I would bring a bunch of things on stage with me that were weapons of destruction. So cooking utensils, belts, hangers, and the shovel. And at the end of the talk, I held up the shovel and I said, this is for moving earth, for building houses, or planting food. This is not a weapon. And it was powerful. It was powerful for me to carry that. And someone said, why is it, don't you want a brand new shovel? No, I want the dirtiest, nastiest shovel I can find because there's blood on this shovel.
Yeah, literally,
anyway.
right? I mean, yeah, it's yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's really what you're talking about is authenticity, right? And you bring it to life through the visuals and through the stories. And I just want to say, I mean, thank you for sharing some of those stories with us. Thank you for just doing all of the amazing work that you're doing. If you've been watching this and you're inspired as I am, there are many ways to get involved. Tell us the URL where people can go to both support the treaty, the Every Woman Treaty, as well as the organization.
So Every Woman Treaty is everywoman.org, and you can actually sign a document that we're calling the People's Treaty. For my work, it's raftcares.org. That's the foundation work. But if you want to get in touch with me to be a speaker or to coach or to something else, then that's indranigoradia.com. So there are many ways. I'm on Facebook, Indrani Goradia. I'm on Instagram, Indrani.Goradia. Raft Cares is on Facebook and Instagram. And all of us at Raft, we love what we do. We show up to work with joy in our hearts. And we will be so joyful to see you join us on any part of the journey.
Definitely people, I think, will do that after watching this. So thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us. And thank you everybody else for tuning in to this very special episode of the Non-Obvious Insights Show that was part of our Beyond Diversity Summit. I hope you enjoyed this talk. There are many others at nonobviousdiversity.com as part of the summit, and lots of episodes every week, new episodes of the Non-Obvious Insights Show with me, Rohit Bhargava. So thank you for joining me this week. Thank you for thinking differently about the world. And remember, always stay non-obvious.